Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, I've got my camera selected. I can see it on my laptop screen itself, but I can't see it within the Zoom window. Okay, this is not fun. Okay, what I can do is I have another laptop, so if you're just patient for a couple of minutes, let me swap out and see if that laptop will show that video. All right, so I'll be right back. Can you hear me and see me now? Okay, so right now, I see a very small window of me. Are you able to see a full screen to see a table behind? Way back here? Okay, so okay, I just want to make sure that this is only the second time I've done a Zoom presentation. The last time I did this was about 5 years ago in the middle of COVID, where I wasn't able to do something in person, so I did it by Zoom. So I need to step back. I'm all by myself. I need to step back to my presentation table, but I want to make sure that everybody can see items on the table as I speak. So if by any chance you don't see something because of the angle of my camera, the distance and stuff like that, please let me know so I can try to fix things along and make this as painless as possible. Okay, so I'm not at my table right now, but I'll get there. Let me see. So I'm at my table. I think I can see enough of it that it looks kind of small to me. So what I can see on my little screen out of my whole laptop window is this much. So just one or two people let me know that they can see me okay. And this is the top of my table, and I'm going to start putting stuff at this level. So let me know, and then I'll walk up to my laptop one more time, then I'll come back to the table. Good, good. All right, so here I am, ta-da, John Hedly from Auburn, Massachusetts. I've given many presentations at many libraries in the Worcester County area. But most of the time I do it, it's a show and tell. I have a PowerPoint presentation, and as I'm going through my slides, I actually do things at the table. And I'm not proficient enough in Zoom yet to know how to like share a PowerPoint presentation. So as I talk, you would see what I'm talking about a lot clearer because you would see the slides on your screen. But I'll do the best I can. And if I can get a couple tips later from somebody else, and we schedule it a second time, and I can do it with PowerPoint presentations, that would be even better. So without further ado. So I'm going to talk about several things tonight. I have a few different types of presentations. I have about an hour and 15 presentation that I do for most libraries. And then I have a 2-night class that I give for adult education programs. One of them is at Baypath down in Charlton, and the other one is at Assabet up in the Marlboro-Hudson area there. And so there's so much information I like to put out in an advanced class. I can't do it in one sitting, so I split it into two. So my library type presentations are a combination of the 2-night presentation. What I'm going to talk about tonight is how you actually go about starting a hive. There are several ways to start a hive if you're interested in becoming a beekeeper. I'll put an actual hive here together tonight, and what I show you will be a typical hive. There are many variations of it, but it looks very close to my 2 hives that I have right now. Then I'll talk about the bees themselves. There are 3 castes of honeybees in a hive. We'll talk about all 3 of the castes. And then I'll talk about all the work that they do. There's a whole bunch of work they do, and it's just amazing, these little insects, that they know from day one that what they have to do. They do a little work outside the hive as well, but most of the work they do is inside the hive. And then towards the end of the presentation, I will talk about actually collecting honey from the hive. I'll show you a couple of tools that we use. If I was in a classroom, my second night of the presentation, I actually bring everything into the classroom that we need to extract honey, and I normally send people home with a little jar of honey. I can't do that with you guys, but I'll at least show you the process. All right, so if you're thinking about buying the equipment that you need to be a beekeeper, there are several items that you need. Not a whole bunch. It's a very, very simple set of tools that you need to be a beekeeper. The first one I'm going to show you, this is called a hive brush. It's a very simple, light feathered brush, and you need this a couple times. If the bees are in your way, either on you or on your equipment or on a part of the hive, and you need to get them out of your way, you just take this brush and you just gently move them away, and they'll just go along and not bother you. So a hive brush. This is a hive tool. They make a couple different variations of this hive tool, but it's got a hook on one end and it's got a wedge on the other end, and both ends serve a very distinct purpose, and I'll show you that as we go along. The third item you need is a smoker. A smoker is very important when you go into a hive. It serves two purposes. When you open up the top of the hive, for whatever reason nature made the bees congregate at the top of the hive, that's what they do. Even though there's work going on down below in the hive, a lot of them are up on top. I don't know if they're having a coffee break or what, but there are so many bees up on top, and they're not doing any work up there. They're just there, and they're in your way when you have to do some work. So what you do, you just open the top of your smoker, you put some sort of fuel in there, like I use dead leaves, dead pine needles, a little bit of cardboard and cloth, things that will catch on fire and then smolder. And so once you light it on fire and you get a good set of embers going in there, you close it up, and it's just a set of bellows. And so when you open up the top of the hive, you put a couple puffs of smoke across the top of those bees, and it does two things. The first thing it does is it breaks their communication skills. They communicate by pheromones. And so when you put a couple puffs of smoke into that hive, it breaks their ability to communicate effectively with each other. And so not that they're going to gang up on you, but it kind of confuses them a little bit, and they're not going to react as well as they normally would if there was some threat there, like an animal or some destructive force. So they just like, oh, what do we do? What do we do? The other thing to do that is actually more helpful to you as a beekeeper is it tricks them. When there's smoke in that hive, they smell it and they say, uh-oh, there's a fire. And so what they do is, vroom, most of the bees will go down into the base of the hive and out of your way. Now there's not as many bees in your way as you start to do your work. You go ahead and do your work in the hive. When you finish, you close everything up. And when everything's closed up and you walk away, the bees go, they smell, they say, oh, we don't smell any smoke anymore, so false alarm, there is no fire. Boom, they go back up to the top of the hive and do what they were doing before. So three simple tools: a smoker, a hive tool, and a brush. Going into the hive, you need some sort of protective gear. They make full-length jumpsuits, they make standalone head veils, and they make jackets. I use the jacket because it's just what I'm most comfortable with. It's really simple to slip on, just like a normal jacket. Elastic at the sleeves. Zipper up the front, zipper across the shoulders, elastic waistband, so the bees, if they are angry for some reason, can't sting you through your jacket. You also need a pair of gloves. because if the bees are angry for some particular reason, they're going to sting whatever they can find on you. So you put a pair of gloves on to do your work. Different beekeepers will wear different outfits. Some like the jacket, some like just the veil, some like the full jumpsuit. Whatever they feel most comfortable with, that's what they wear. The only thing I need to point out about what you should be wearing when you go into the hive is make sure that you have good socks and shoes. If you wear just a jacket like I do, I normally go out to the hive with a pair of blue jeans on. But I make sure I tuck my pants into my boots so the bees can't go up my pant legs if they're down at that area. So, good protective clothing, simple tools. If you're thinking about being a beekeeper, you can buy a kit that's got a jacket, a smoker, a hive tool, and a brush. Nowadays about $40, $45, so not too bad. If you do some good shopping online, and I'll talk about hive equipment as well, you can see different prices. You know what I'm talking about. If you do shopping online, you see somebody will charge $75 for this, and somebody else will charge you $300. And they're hoping that you're not so smart or savvy of a shopper, and you'll buy that $300 thing when you can buy something for $75. So if you're going to be a beekeeper, do some smart shopping, because you can get all sorts of equipment packages and some of the stuff you don't need, and at different prices. So do some smart shopping. For all intents and purposes, working at the hive, you just need a brush, a tool, smoker, gloves, and some sort of protective clothing. I'm going to put a hive here together tonight, but I'll tell you ahead of time, if you're thinking about becoming a beekeeper and you're going to buy some hive components, you'll see some of my equipment here tonight is unfinished wood, and you'll see some of it is finished wood, but it's just because I use it for classroom purposes. But my hives are all painted white. If you could buy a hive kit, and I'll just give you one example. I saw one just a couple months ago. I'm going to show you different size boxes, different pieces here, but maybe I'll wait until the hive is together before I tell you the price, so you're not confused about what I'm talking about. So, to start a hive, where do you get your bees? There are several ways that you can get your bees. One is you can buy a package of bees. The second method is you can buy a nuke. Nuke just stands for nucleus, just an abbreviation for nucleus. Nuke. You can find bees in the wild. Very tricky, but they're out there, so I'll just say that's really, really easy to talk about before I talk about the other ones. The old Yogi Bear cartoons where there's bees in a dead tree, there are ways to get them out of a dead tree. So if you can find bees in the wild, that's one way to get some bees. Another way is to start with the bees is what they call an established hive. And then the last one is a swarm, and I'll talk about swarm in a second. So as far as a package is concerned, where's my package? I had it yesterday. Okay. So this is what they call a package of bees. It's a box bigger than a loaf of bread, but not as big as a bread box. It's usually wood, and it's got screens on both sides. And I don't know how clearly you can see, but if you look inside, there's a can in there. And that can contains sugar water, all right? So what happens around here, there aren't a whole bunch of bee suppliers around here, but there are a lot of people that will take your order for a package. What they do is they take your order. You want to start a beehive with a package. So you go online or you go to the person, you call them up or whatever you do, and you order a package. This is 3 pounds of bees, about 10,000 bees. And that's just a start. Sounds like a lot of bees, but it really isn't. Because once the summer comes, you're going to have a whole lot more bees, but that's what you start with. So what happens is, once you place your orders during the winter and early spring, the people that supply the bees will have a cutoff, And then what they do in April is they'll go down, they'll get an empty truck, they'll go down south to someplace like South Carolina or Georgia, and they'll put all your orders on that truck and drive it back to Massachusetts. And because it's going to take them a couple of days to get back to Massachusetts, the bees are going to be hungry. And so that's what that can of sugar water is for. That's for them to eat. It's filled with sugar water. There's some holes punched in the bottom. So while the bees are in that box, they'll drink that sugar water out of that can. All right, now the way they fill this box is very special. They have a large scale, and they'll take an empty box, and they'll put that empty box on that scale, and they'll go off to this side, and they'll get some frames of bees, and they'll shake it into the funnel, and then they'll go get another frame and shake it into the funnel. And when that scale says 3 pounds, they'll put a cover on top of the box so the bees can't get out. Now you've got 3 pounds of bees. Then they'll go over here. They raise queens separately. They'll take a queen from over there and put her in her own little box. This is called a queen's cage. It's just got a strap. It's a little wooden box. It's got a screen on one side. And they'll put a queen in there with a couple of female attendants to keep her company, clean her, feed her on her trip from down south to Massachusetts. At the bottom of that box, they'll put a sugar cube in there. And then after they put the sugar cube in there, they'll put a cork in there. Now, the reason why they keep her separate when she's in this box is because she is not their queen. If they were to just take this queen and those bees and put them in the same box, those bees would kill her because she is not their queen. They only want their queen. But again, I'm going to use the term magic, and I'm going to use the term nature a couple of times. So now she's in this box. She's coming from down south to Massachusetts. That whole trip, the bees are going to see that screen, and they're going to walk by that screen and smell her and touch her and taste her. When it comes time for me to put these bees into the hive, I'll put these bees into the hive, and I'll take that cork out. Now that exposes that sugar cube to all those bees, and I'll hang this in the hive. And it takes about 3 days for the bees to chew through that sugar cube. And because she's hanging there 3 more days, where the bees are going by her on a daily basis, and they finally chew their way through that sugar cube, that queen will emerge, and they will adopt her as their queen. A nice feat of nature to let them adopt her and make her their queen. So that's a queen cage inside what they call a package. Oh, one thing I didn't say at the very, very beginning is I know a lot of you might have some questions, but most of the time when I give my presentations, somewhere along the line, I will answer your question without me realizing it. So I would ask you to just don't ask any questions until the very end, because when I'm done, I might have answered your question, but by all means, if you have a question at the end, I will answer it at the end. So that's how you can start a beehive with what they call a package of bees. Right now, a package of bees around this area here is somewhere about $160 to $170 if you buy a package. Nuke. This is what you call a nuke. They come in plastic, they come in wood, they come in cardboard. But to jump ahead with my lecture is, if I am a brand new beekeeper and I put empty frames into my hive and I start with a package, those bees have to start from day one to build up that hive. Their main focus is to build honeycomb on all their frames so the queen can lay eggs, they can store honey, etc., building their home. It takes them a while to do that. But if you start with a nuke, what you have in the nuke, this is one frame. You get 5 frames that are already built up with honeycomb, some new brood in there, some pollen, some honey. And so you take these frames out of your nuke and put them into your hive, 5 frames that are already built up, 2 hives sitting side by side. This one you start with a package, this one you start with a nuke. This one's got a head start on this one because they've already got 5 frames built up, and these have none built up. They have to build up their frame. So the advantage of buying a nuke, you get more bees over a package, is a jump start on your hive, and you get more bees, so there's more bees to do more work, et cetera, et cetera. They're more expensive because you're getting no frames with the package, you're getting 5 frames with the nuke. So right now it's about $250, $275, somewhere in that range today if you were to buy a nuke. Different people, different prices. So you can start with a package, you can start with a nuke, you can start with wild bees if you can get them, and the last 2 are what they call a swarm or an established hive. So an established hive is what I did for somebody else. I didn't talk about my background, how I got started with beekeeping. Maybe I'll do that at the very, very end. But I had 2 beehives where I used to live in Auburn. Big house, nice backyard. I had 2 hives in the backyard. The kids are grown, they moved out of the house. We don't need the big house anymore. So started looking for a place to live, different condos. We found a condo that we liked, and I knew that I couldn't keep my bees on the condo land. I had a couple of people offer me, I was allowed to put my bees on their land. And that was nice that they would do that, but I didn't want to do that because if my bees are on somebody else's land, I've got to leave my house with all my stuff, go to somebody else's house, gear up, work on my hives. And my main concern was if I forgot something at home, I'm going to have to close the hive back up, take my gear off, get in the car, drive home, get what I forgot, drive back to go through the process again. I didn't want to do that. That was work. But fortunately, so what I did is I sold my 2 hives I had at the time. Somebody was going to be a beekeeper. So he bought my 2 hives. You move beehives at nighttime. So at nighttime comes when all the bees are in the hive, we close everything up, strapped them down, put them on his pickup truck. He drove from point A to point B, put him in his yard, undid everything. The next morning, the bees left his hive and did their work at his place. So that's an established hive, one that just goes from one place to the other one. The last way you can start a beehive is with what they call a swarm. There's a situation in a beehive called swarming. There's a few different reasons why they would swarm, but the major one is they do everything for the good of the hive. And so as the hive gets built up, if you're not a good beekeeper and you don't give them room to grow, et cetera, it's going to be cramped in there for them. And they realize that. They're going to say, hey, there's not enough room in here for all of us bees. So what they will do, if they feel crowded, is they will make a new queen. And when that queen hatches, half of the bees will leave the hive with the old queen, and the rest of the bees will stay behind with the new queen. Now it's not as crowded anymore. And so what they do is when they come out of the hive in a swarm, is they'll fly around, many thousands of bees. It's kind of spooky, but it's not dangerous. They'll find a place to land. A tree, the side of a house, somebody's car. They don't care. They just want to hang out for a while until they find a new home. And when they hang out there, they send out scouts to find a new home. And when the scouts come back and they say, all right, we know where our new home is going to be, they leave that spot and they follow the scouts to the new home. So they'll usually hang out at their holding place for a couple hours. So if you can get those bees, I'm not going to make the joke, but those are freebies. You can take those bees, you can capture those bees, and you can start your hive with those bees. And that happens all the time. I'm on the list of people in the Worcester County area that will go to somebody's house if there is a swarm and try to recover them. When I'm in class, I have pictures of 2 times last year that made national news with a swarm. The first one was around February or March in California. There was a tennis tournament, and a swarm of bees landed on the camera that went back and forth across the tennis court. And so they got a beekeeper out there, and she captured those bees. The other one was a baseball game, Arizona, I forget who they were playing, but the bees swarmed and they landed at the netting up behind home plate. And so they got a beekeeper out there. He went up there, he captured those bees before the game started. And when he got down, the people that were in the stadium gave him a standing ovation, and they let him throw out the first pitch for the ball game. So that was a nice honor for helping out the ball team by capturing a swarm. So those are the 5 ways you can start a hive: a nuke, a package, wild bees, a swarm, or an established hive. Very, very common, easy methods to do it. All right, so let's put a hive here together tonight. All right, just so you know, honeybees don't live in the ground. Honeybees don't live in a tree. There are other wasps and hornets and other types of bees that will live in those environments, but honeybees don't live in those places. They need to be off the ground and in some sort of structure. So your first thing you need to construct a hive is this piece called a hive stand. So I have 2 hive stands on a plastic pallet. It doesn't have to be plastic, but I just think that's cool because now I don't have to worry about wood underneath there rotting over time. I used to have wood and it started to rot. So if you can find something that will stand up to the weather, that'll be cool. You can use composite decking material that stands up to the weather good, but they've got to be off the ground. I don't think there's any minimum distance. Mine are sitting on a plastic pallet right now, the 2 hives I have now, that is sitting on 4 concrete blocks. So it's off the ground about maybe 12 to 14 inches. And sitting on that plastic pallet is my 2 hive stands. All right, so let me back up. Since I sold my 2 hives, so that's my established hives. I moved into the condo. I found out that one of my friend's brother lives on the land that abuts the condo land, and he said I could keep my bees on his condo land. So I went right out and bought 2 brand new hives and put my hives on my neighbor's yard. And so today, when I want to work on the hive, I put all my stuff in my little red wagon. I go 50 yards down my street and cut into my neighbor's yard. So he was very nice enough to let me put my hives on his yard. So the hive stand, the first thing you have. The second thing you're going to put on that is the bottom board. Again, nothing fancy about it. If you go online and look for a beehive structure, you'll see a hive stand and you'll see the bottom board. This is their ground floor. So on top of that, you're going to put the first box of the hive there, and they make different size boxes. This is called a deep box. This is called a deep super. It's called a brood box. They have different names. I just call it a big box. This is the start of their nursery. The first box you put there, most people use a deep brood box to start their beehive. If you look, right now there's an opening. I hope you can see that okay. My finger's from the inside like that. And right now, that's their entrance in and out of the hive once I close everything up. And that doesn't look like much to you and me, but this is a brand new hive. And even though 10,000 bees sounds like a lot of bees, in the bee world, it's not. Because there are other beehives around me, there's 6 of them within a half-a-mile distance from me, that if they sense that this is a weak hive, and it is as a new hive, they will try to get into that hive and steal my bees' honey. And my bees don't want that to happen, and I don't want that to happen. So you have this little stick of wood called an entrance reducer. It's just a square stick, and on one side, it's got a very narrow opening, just about 1 inch. And if I turn it, it's got a wider opening, about 1.5 inches to 1.75 inches. And so to help the bees protect their hive, when I first start a hive, I put this stick in place so that only the small opening is showing. All right, now I'm going to step up to the screen to make sure I'm not missing anything, then I'll come back to the hive. Am I still blurry? Somebody commented. Nancy said I'm blurry. Okay, just to make sure, like that. So right now, the only opening, if I close this up, the only opening for the hive is that little opening on that entrance reducer. As time goes on and I have more bees and they need more access in and out, maybe a little bit more ventilation, I'll take that stick and I'll turn it just 90 degrees, and now I'll let the wide opening show. And so now a few bees can go in and out at the same time. And now they don't have to defend the whole opening, they just have to defend this little opening. And then as the summertime comes along and there's a lot more bees and they need some ventilation and they can protect the hive a lot easier, I'll take that entrance reducer out altogether, and now they can defend that whole opening, and now a whole bunch of bees can go in and out because there's a lot more bees. So the entrance reducer. So every box, no matter what size it is, they have 3 standard sizes: the deep box, the medium, and the shallow boxes. It doesn't matter what size the boxes are, they all hold 10 frames. So I showed you one frame, but that one frame I showed you is a very simple setup that a lot of people use nowadays. It's just a wooden frame with some slots in it, and they take a piece of plastic that's coated with wax and stamped in a honeycomb pattern, and they snap it into place into this wooden frame. And so that's what we have here. This is in black, and I like to use black in my bottom boxes where the brood area is, because when the queen lays her eggs, when she first lays those eggs, they're white and they're smaller than a grain of rice. So if I am in a hive looking for new eggs, you can see how difficult it would be looking for a little white egg against a white background, and it's a lot easier to see a little white egg against a black background. Different beekeepers think differently. I just prefer to use black down below versus white. The bees don't care what color it is. The queen will lay eggs on white just as easily on black. She'd probably lay it on polka dot. She probably would, but it's, for me, easier to see against a black background. So there's 10 frames in that box. And so when I put the bees in there, I'll put the queen in there, take that cork out, wait for the bees to chew through that sugar cube. I'll leave those bees alone for 3 days, because that's how long it should take the bees to chew through that sugar cube. So I'll go back there after 3 days and I'll look to make sure she's out of that cage. If she's not out of her cage for some particular reason, I bring a needle with me and I poke through that sugar cube and break it up and put that little queen box back in there. And now it's a lot easier for the bees to chew through that pieces of sugar cube versus a wad of a sugar cube. And I'll wait a couple days, I'll go back and double check, and I'm pretty sure I've never seen anybody go more than like 5 days before the queen got out. Now I won't go back into the hive for about a week to 10 days. Those bees will take this blank frame. It's got the wax and the honeycomb pattern on both sides, 10 of these sitting in there. They like to work in the center, and they build up that first 1 or 2 frames, and they do the same thing going out to the sides. When I see, I'll go back there a week later, I'll go back a week after that, I'm just checking on, make sure the queen's laying eggs, the bees are doing well, and I watch them build. And when that first brood box is about 70 to 80% built up, then I will put a second big brood box on top of the first one with 10 frames in it. The bees will go up and they'll do the same thing. They'll start building honeycomb on those frames and they'll go out to the sides. And for the most part, that's what most beekeepers do. They have 2 brood boxes. You'll see some variations out there, but from my experience, I've been doing this for 17 years now, most beekeepers use 2 deep brood boxes for their brood area. Amen. So that's the brood area. The queen's going to lay eggs. They're going to store pollen. They're going to store honey down there. And it's my job to know that the queen has got enough room to lay eggs. They're storing the right amount of honey. You learn these things over time. And I'll just leave it at that. That's what beekeepers do. There's certain things you do at different times of year. Got my second box on, checking my second box. Now, for classroom purposes, I only use 1 big box, but I want you to imagine that I have 2 big boxes. Before I put on my box that I want to collect honey from, I'm going to put this device on top of my second big box. This is what we call a queen excluder. I don't know if you can see it through the camera into my background, but I'll walk just to make sure. It's a grid. And the purpose of this grid is, if I'm a beekeeper and I want to collect honey, I'm not going to take their honey from down below. That's their food. That's what they eat themselves. That's what they feed their young. I'm leaving that honey alone. But I'm a beekeeper and I want to collect honey from me. So on my second big box, I'll put the queen excluder on top. Now that grid pattern is small enough to let the workers go through it from the 2 boxes and go up into my honey box and store honey. But the grid is too small to let the queen go through because she is the largest of the bees in the hive. So she can't go through there. So she is trapped in my brood boxes. So the only bees that can go up and do honey are the workers. And so that's the queen excluder to keep the queen down below. And then I put my honey super on there. And again, 10 frames. I don't care if they're black or white finish, but the same thing, a wooden frame, sheet of plastic, coated with wax, stamped in a honeycomb pattern, 10 of those in every box. And I'll put those 10 frames in there. The bees will build that up with honeycomb and work to the outside. As a beekeeper, I'll go down there every week and I'll check to see if any one of these frames is completely filled with honey. So that's a blank one. I have to, if you were in a classroom, you can see this a lot easier. But this is one that they've put honeycomb. It's a little bit beat up because I use it for classroom purposes, but they've built honeycomb on both sides of this. And now they'll start storing honey in there. And again, this is a little bit beat up, but this is what you're looking for. This is one side, and that's the other side, almost filled with honey. And when I see one filled with honey, I take it out of there. And then I put an empty one in there for them to fill up again. And that's the way I collect my honey. I like to take my honey as it's ready. Other beekeepers, when this box is full of honey, they'll put a second box, a honey box on there. And when that second box is full, they'll put a third. You know, I've seen beehives that are like 7, 8 boxes tall. I don't like to do that. I like to take my honey when each frame is full. If I go in there, there's 3, I'll take 3 out, put 3 empty ones in there. And I do that on purpose because there are some people that when they buy my honey, the spring honey is a very light color honey, and I'll just call it mild. The fall honey is very dark, and it's richer. And some people like the flavor of this one versus the flavor of that one. And so in order to accommodate people who like one or the other, when I take my June frames out of there, I'm going to get light honey. When I take my August or September frames out of there, I'll have dark honey. And I like to keep them separate for that reason. Other people will just take all their honey frames out at once. It's a mixture of light and dark. They'll extract the honey, and so they'll get a medium color by combining the light and the dark. They don't care too much about supplying people with light or dark honey. They're just supplying honey, which is perfectly fine. When you buy honey in the store, you don't know what month it was coming from, any hive along, so you just like the taste of the honey. So that's the honey super. That's the frames that are in there. Every hive has got two covers. You have an inner cover, and your inner cover will have a hole in it, and it'll have a notch in it. And when this is in place, that notch gives a little bit of ventilation. This hive will get very warm, so as that hot air rises, it lets the hot air out of that little notch. It also gives them a second entrance. You know, we know they're going in and out of here at the bottom floor, but there's a notch there that if they want, they can land up on the side and crawl into that notch. So the notch serves two purposes. And this hole in the middle serves a purpose for feeding them. There may be times where you have to feed your bees. Not all the time, but there are certain times where you might have to feed your bees. And so with the cover, with the hole, they can come up through this box and go through that hole and eat whatever you're feeding them. In the wintertime, I just have a little spacer. It's not even 2 inches tall, but it's the same shape as the hive. And so in the wintertime, if I feed them, I'll make a sugar patty, just like a mud pie. You don't want it all gooey. You want it just barely enough to stay together. And you put that sugar patty up there on top of that inner cover, and that spacer gives that patty enough room to sit there. And then you put your outer cover on top. It's a very solid piece of wood covered with metal to protect it against the elements. So that, and then I don't have a picture here, but then you want to have some sort of rock or stone or brick sitting on top of your hive, because these just sit there. You don't attach them to each other. It's just gravity and the weight of the boxes themselves that hold everything together. But just to make sure, even though this sounds pretty solid, a good strong wind could pick that up. So you put some sort of weight on top to help keep everything in place. So that's a hive, a typical hive. So I can pause now. I'll walk up to the laptop, and if anybody has a question about something I discussed so far, I'll give you guys a chance to do that. Thank you. All right, you can start a hive 5 ways. A swarm, wild bees, established hive, nuke and package. Okay. I'll go back to my table. I'll see if there's a question as it pops up along with it. So where I live in Auburn, my end of Auburn, I don't worry about bears. The bees have a couple of natural enemies, raccoons, skunks, and bears. A skunk and a raccoon is not going to damage the hive. but they'll park themselves in front of the hive and they'll try to capture bees as they come and go and eat them. They're not going to sit there and eat 1,000 bees, because the bees will start to protect the hive if there's a danger from an animal like that. But I don't want them eating one of my bees. But I really haven't noticed any problem with raccoons or skunk where my hives are right now. There are parts of Auburn that do have bears, and a bear will tear a hive apart. So those people have got an electric fence around their hive. So when the bear comes to, the only way the bear can get to the hive is through the electric fence. And once they get zapped, they get smart. They don't usually come back a second time. I'm going to talk about honey in a little bit. So hold your questions about honey. We haven't talked about the bees or the honey yet. We'll get there. So that's natural threats to the bees. So to the bees, those animals there. Okay, so the rest is cool if you have pictures. So I'm just going to have to talk through a lot of the other stuff I'm going to talk about tonight. So in your bees that you put into the hive, you've got 3 castes of bees. You've got the queen, you've got the workers, and you've got the drones. All right. Now the queen is the easy one to talk about. There's only one queen in the hive. I said one of the reasons they might swarm is if it's too crowded, they will make a second queen. But normally, if everything is done right in a perfect world, there's only one queen in the hive. She lives to be about 5 years old. That's her lifespan. When you put a virgin queen into the hive, she'll come out and she'll do a mating flight near the hive. Male bees from my hive or other hives that are in the area will smell her pheromones. It's just like a dog in heat. They'll know there's a queen in heat and they'll mate with her. And when she comes back to the hive, she'll have mated with several different males, not only from my hive, but other hives as well, if they're near me. And I know they are, if it was that situation. And she'll have enough sperm stored inside her body to last her 5 years. So she has ovaries just kind of like human women, and with all her eggs in the ovaries. And in the summertime, that queen will lay anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 eggs a day. Very, very prolific queen egg-laying machine. She walks, lays an egg, walks, lays an egg, walks. That's all she does is lay eggs during the day. She'll rest at nighttime, but then she'll pick up that pace. Come the fall, she'll slow down. In the wintertime, she doesn't lay any eggs. Late winter, early spring, she'll start to lay eggs again, and she made like 100 this day, 300 the next day, 500 next week, 1,000 in the summer. So that's what I mean, and that's the cycle she does. Okay, so she lives to be 5 years old, one queen per hive, lays a whole bunch of eggs. That's the queen. The drones, they're the males. They don't do any work in the hive. They are lazy bums. They do serve a couple of purposes, and I just gave you one example where they might hang around in case they have to mate with a queen. That's one of their outside the hive functions. They do have a couple of other things they do outside the hive, but that's an advanced class. But for all intents and purposes for this class, they're just hanging around in case they have to mate with a queen. They don't do any work in the hive. So the workers know the value of the drone at certain times of year. So they let them stay in the hive because they might need them. But here comes fall and winter. There is not going to be any queen coming out of a hive, no queen coming out of a hive in November, December. So the girls talk among themselves and they say, hey, look, boys, we kept you here in the hive. We fed you. We cleaned you. And we let you stay there, and we did that because we might need you to mate with the queen. But here comes wintertime, boys. There's not going to be any mating with any queens in the wintertime, so goodbye. What they do is they chase the boys out of the hive in the wintertime. If they can't chase the boys out of the hive because the boys fly back into the hive, they'll trap them somewhere in the hive and they'll chew their wings off. And they'll take them out and they'll drop them on the ground, and because he can't fly, they die. And if they can't chew their wings off because he's running around, they'll finally trap them somehow, and the girls will gang up on them, and they'll beat their wings and generate enough heat, and they'll overpower them with heat, and they'll kill them with heat. Mean girls. So in the wintertime, there are no boys in the hive, only the queen and the other girls. But the bees are smart at the same time. As mean as they are, and as vicious as they are to do that to the boys when the wintertime comes, they talk and they say, hey, here comes springtime. If we make another queen, we're going to need some boys to mate with her. So the queen will lay some boy eggs. Those boys will hatch. Now you got boys in the hive again, and the cycle just repeats itself every year. That's the queen and the boys, the drones. The worker bees. The worker bees are the girls. They're the females in the hive. They call them workers for a reason. They do all of the work in the hive. I told you we take a wooden frame, we put a piece of plastic in there that's coated with wax, it's empty. They put it in there. The bees build honeycomb on that frame. Those workers do that. They know where to put the pollen in the hive. They know where to put the honey in the hive. They do all of that. Very, very hard workers. They work all day. They rest at nighttime. They don't like sleep like you and I do, but they just sit off to the side and recover because they did so much work. But they do all the work. Now, just as it doesn't matter if you're a boy bee, the girl bee, which is the worker, or the queen, even though there's only one, all three of those go through the same life cycle. When the queen lays an egg, I said it's smaller than a grain of rice. It grows and grows and turns into a larva, that grub-looking thing that you might see other insects outside underneath rocks and logs and stuff like that here in your lawn. Then it develops from the larva to the pupa stage. And when it's almost fully developed, the bees will cap it in the cell, and they'll give it one last feeding right before they cap it. And then when it's fully developed, that bee will chew through that wax capping and emerge as a brand new bee. So they all go through that same cycle. Let's see here. So let's talk about the work that the bees do inside the hive. Again, the boys don't do anything. The queen's job is just to lay eggs. So all the work that the females, the workers, do. From the very first day those bees are born, those bees start working. They're young, they're a little bit weak, they're not strong, but they can do a little bit of house cleaning. So those bees that are only a couple of days old will walk around and clean the cells, because the queen will not lay an egg if there's a little piece of wax in there that the last bee chewed to get out. If that queen walks by that cell and it's a piece of grass in there, a piece of dirt, or a piece of wax in there, she'll walk right by it. So it's up to those brand new 1 or 2 day old bees to walk around and clean the cells out so the queen has got a space to lay eggs. When they're about 7 to 10 days old, now they will start feeding the young bees. When the queen lays an egg, those worker bees at this part of their life will give that egg, larva, pupa, depending on what stage it's in, a little bit of water, a little bit of honey, a little bit of pollen, a little bit of royal jelly to let it grow. And right before, as I just mentioned a minute ago, right before it's fully developed, they'll give it one last feeding, a super dose of food, because it's going to be in there several more days without being fed. they'll cap it so that developing bee will have food inside there, nourishing it to finish growing it and climb the way out. So the nurse bees, when they're about 7 to 10 days old. 10 days to about 2 weeks old. Now their body is a little bit more developed. They've got glands in their bodies that can make wax. Their food is the honey that they're collecting. So down here, where all the queen is laying the eggs in the 2 boxes, there's honey stored there. So those bees will take these girls that are about 10 days old to 2 weeks old will take some honey inside their body to nourish themselves, but at the same time, that makes wax out of their glands. Now, they can make wax, but they can't build the honeycomb. They're not strong enough yet to build the honeycomb. They can just make it. So what they'll do is they'll squeeze some of the wax out of their glands and hand it off to the older bees who are stronger and let those older bees build the honeycomb. So that's what the younger bees do. They make it. And also right around this time, these are the bees that will feed the boys. So from about 14 days to maybe 17, 18 days, some of these bees will take care of the queen. The queen is walking all around down there looking for places to lay eggs. So when she goes to a spot and lays an egg, she pauses. There'll be some of these bees that will make a little circle around her and to protect her and clean her and feed her while she's in that spot. After she lays an egg, she moves. Those bees will dissipate. She'll pause at another cell. There'll be another group of bees that will circle her to take care of her and protect her if that's what happens. So queen attendants at this point in their life. Towards the tail end of those 2 weeks and 17, 18 days, now they're stronger. Now they can actually build the honeycomb. So these older bees will take the wax that the younger bees made, and they'll be the ones that will build the honeycomb. They'll take that empty frame I showed you, and again, it's a little bit tricky to see, but I showed you with the honeycomb. They'll take my blank frame, whether it's black or white, doesn't make a difference, and they build the honeycomb on there, on both sides. And if you look at that, I can tell looking at my little screen, I mean, literally my little screen that I can see what you guys hopefully see in the full screen is about 2 inches by 2 inches. But I can still tell looking at this frame. If you look at that frame, there's an oval shape. See, that's darker on this side. Same thing here, darker down at the bottom of the screen. That tells me that that's all honeycomb on both sides, but that dark honeycomb pattern is where the queen laid her eggs. And I know that because I'm an experienced beekeeper, but why that is dark like that is because this is where all the work is being done. So, you know, it's just like your house. If you keep on going in and out of the door and on the rug, walking back and forth, walking back and forth, walking back all the time, and you don't clean it, that spot of the rug or that spot of the floor gets dirty. And that's what's happening here. Because there's so much work going on right there, that part of the frame gets dirty. So that's where the queen laid her eggs, and that's where all the work was being done. And this area around the top there is the lighter color. That's where the bees stored pollen and honey on both sides. So every frame is a mini nursery. Eggs on the bottom, food on the top. So this is what they do to those 2 boxes, 20 frames, 10 and 10. Those bees will build the wax on that empty frame to look something like this. Again, this is a little bit beat up because I use it for classroom, but I think you get my point. So the older bees are doing that, building the honeycomb. Storing honey after they build the honeycomb, storing pollen. And one more thing that they make, we know that they gather pollen, we know they gather nectar and they make honey. I know they make the wax out of their glands, but another substance they make is called propolis. And I have to look it up. I never question anybody, nobody ever questioned me. Is it propolis or propolis? Tomato, it's the same stuff. I call it propolis. They take tree sap, they take nectar, they take saliva, and they mix it together with their mouth, and it becomes like caulking material. And what they do is they seal every place in that hive where two pieces of wood join each other. And it's amazing. I understand some of it. You know, you put a box on top of there, where those two boxes meet, even though in a perfect world, you don't think you would need to seal it, but it's not a perfect world. There's little gaps here and there where any two pieces of wood touch another piece of wood. So they will take that propolis and seal it just like caulking material. All around the edges, up and down the sides, where those frames sit on top of the wooden ledge in there, where the two frames sit inside, but they will propolis seal those two frames together. They will seal those frames to the box. They will seal your inner cover to your top box. And that's the purpose of your hive tool. They seal this inner cover to the top box. So you just take your wedge side, get in there, and break the seal so you can take your cover off. So I don't know, yeah, I think I can show you here, and I can show you there. This is my spacer. You see that brownish orange? Can you? I don't know if you how well you can see it. I can't see it well. That brownish yellowish material on that white background. You can see some brown along there as well. That's propolis, where they seal these pieces of wood to each other. So that this point of their life, the worker bees are making propolis and sealing everything in the hive. And then a sad job is because sometimes the bees will die inside the hive. And so if a bee dies and falls to that bottom board, these are the bees that will walk at the bottom board and take that dead bee out and drop it on the ground in front of the hive. I will always see dead bees in front of my hive. I'm not worried about it because I know that, all right, just as an example, if the queen lays 1,000 eggs today, in a certain amount of time, I'm going to have 1,000 dead bees. They're not going to all die at the same time, but I think you get my point that they're going to take out 10, they're going to take out 20, they're going to take out 50. Today, tomorrow, the next day, there's always dead bees in front of the hive because the bees inside the hive are taking them out of the hive and dropping them there. Another thing at this point in their life they're doing is they're fanning. There's a lot of fanning going on inside the hive. It gets very hot inside the hive. Just as a point of reference, in my 2 boxes for the brood area, in order for the bees to grow from an egg to a larva to a pupa to a grown adult, that hive has got to be 92 degrees. And so when it's chilly at nighttime, kind of like this time of year, the bees will beat their wings to generate enough heat to keep that hive at least 92 degrees. They have built-in thermostats. And they'll also do some fanning. If it gets too hot in there, they'll fan their wings a different direction to get some air circulating to make it a little bit cooler inside the hive. Another fanning that they will do is up in the honey supers. The way that they make honey is when they go to the field and bring back nectar and ingest it, when they regurgitate it, there's a chemical change taking place in their body. They store that liquid inside the honeycomb, and it's got a high water content. So they'll fan that nectar that's turning into honey, fan it to evaporate some of the water content. And once they fan it to the right level, again, I don't know how they do it, but they know exactly when it's perfect honey. That's when they cap it. So that's some more fanning that's going on. Now they're a little bit older, 3 weeks old. Now is the time that they'll do guard duty. I told you they have to protect their hive. They have a couple different levels of guard duty. You don't know that they're on guard duty, but you'll always see bees hanging around the front of the hive. Those are the guys that are on women. Those are the women that are on guard duty. They'll also have some bees flying around outside the hive on guard duty. And the reason why they do that is because they have a great great sense of smell. And I talk about this in my classroom, is you know how good a sense of smell a dog has. They use dog to find drugs, weapons, dead people, bad guys going to the woods, tracking dogs. They've got a great sense of smell, those dogs, great. They've done tests and they've got published studies. A honeybee has got a sense of smell that is 50 times greater than a dog. Tremendous sense of smell. So it's like advanced warning. So if they're out there flying around on guard duty, if they smell a threat, like a skunk, a raccoon, or a bear, they will come back and tell some of the bees to be on alert because they smelled something and they have to be ready to defend the hive if something comes to the hive. So they're guard duty here and up in the air as well. They'll also go they drink water just like you and I. They don't like running water because that's a threat to them. If they get into running water, it's going to brush them away. They like standing water where they can go up to the edge of a puddle or a pool, drink water, and then take off. So they're water carriers that will go get water and bring it back to the hive. When they're about 3 weeks old to 5 weeks old, now these are the bees that will go out and get pollen and nectar. Pollen and nectar. 3 weeks old to 5 weeks old, that's what they do. As soon as the sun comes up and hits that hive, they're out of the hive. They will go up to 2 miles away to find pollen or nectar to bring it back to the hive. It's great if it's 100 yards away, but if there's nothing close by the hive, they will fly as far as 2 miles away to bring it back to the hive. They'll do their trip, they'll drop it off, they'll go out again, they'll come back all day, back and forth, bringing stuff back to the hive. Nighttime comes, they'll rest. Next day, repeats itself all day. And unfortunately, because that's how hard they work in the June, July, August, September timeframe, they work themselves to death. They only live to be about 5 weeks old in the summertime because they just work themselves to death. And in the wintertime, they live a lot longer, 3 to 4 months, because they're just in the hive. They don't hibernate. They cluster to keep warm, to beat their wings to stay warm, but they're not doing any work, so they live a lot longer in the winter. But in the summertime, a lot of them don't make it back to the hive. They just, because they're getting tired. They go out one time in July, they're 4 or 5 weeks old, they just can't make it back to the hive. They go down to the ground and they die. So it's a shame, but that's how hard they work. That's what happens. So that's the life of the bees, the work of the bees inside the hive. And we love them to do all that because as a beekeeper, I'll tell you, I got interested in beekeeping because I am fascinated with these little creatures. 17 years, I'm still fascinated with them because I'm learning stuff all the time. And I just answered the question again today with somebody else. I was at a ceremony today. Somebody said, how much honey do you get out of a hive a year? It's very situational. It depends on the weather. I'm going to use the term average. On an average spring and summer. But we know we don't always have an average spring and summer. Last summer, it was pouring rain a whole bunch of time. And then the other days it was 95 degrees. So you had your ups and downs. But on an average, you should get somewhere about 70 to 80 pounds of honey per hive on an average summer. If you got a great summer, you're going to get 100 pounds. If you have a bad summer, you're going to get 40 pounds. So it's all situational. But they use the range of about 70 pounds per hive on a good average year. So let's talk about the honey. I have my honey super here. I put in an empty frame. They were nice. They built honeycomb on it. And if they did a good job, they filled it both sides with honey. The way that we extract honey is, I told you what I do. If I go down there one day and this is full of honey, I'll take an old frame, not old, but one that they have used before that's empty and put it in there to fill that spot, and I'll take this one home. And I try not to do one at a time, but if I do, I'll just save it until I get a few of them. But what we do is, you really can't see it with the camera angle, is they actually build and fill their honeycombs so it sticks out a little bit past the wood. just a little bit past the wood. This is an extracting knife. It's serrated. It's manual. It's a knife. They make electric ones that heat up. I don't care. This one works just fine for me. What you do is you lay this knife on the wood, and then just like shaving, you go down the wood. I don't want to do it here because I don't want to ruin this frame, but you take your knife and you just go along the wood because those honeycomb cells stick out past the wood. So when you go down the wood, you're shaving off the caps of the honey. You turn around the frame and you do the same thing, shave it, those wax cappings fall out. You've got a frame of gooey, leaky honey out of the cells. That's a frame of honey. Don't go away. Oh, one other thing. You don't need this. This is an EpiPen set. I'm not allergic to bee stings today. I don't know about tomorrow. But if you're a beekeeper, you should have your doctor write your prescription for an EpiPen set in case you go out there, you have an allergic reaction to a bee sting or a friend or a relative that gets stung. Be ready just in case. And I always joke about it. If your doctor will say, hey, you're not allergic to bee stings. Yeah, but I'm a beekeeper. He goes, I don't care. If your doctor won't write you a prescription for an EpiPen set because you're a beekeeper, get a new doctor. Your doctor should be smart enough to realize that you need an EpiPen set if you're a beekeeper. So we've got those frames of honey. This is an extractor. You take those frames that you shaved off, and there's baskets in the extractor. You shave the other one, put it in there. My extractor will hold 4 frames. And you gotta, it's like a washing machine, you know, you've got to balance it. Put one in one frame in one basket, and one frame in the other basket. You don't do 2 in 1, because it's going to be like a washing machine that's out of balance. It'll blah, 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 blah. You don't want that. So you put 1 in 1 or 2 in 2. So you put 4 frames in there, and mine is manual. It's just a crank. But you crank that as fast as you can for about 30 seconds. And what you're doing is you're whipping the honey out of one side of the frame. It hits the side of the barrel, goes down to the bottom. You do that twice. When it stops, you take those frames out, you turn them around, put them back in there, crank it again. Now you're whipping the honey out of the other side of the frame. That honey goes down to the bottom of the extractor, and I think you can see it here. There's a valve at the bottom. You've got all that honey in the barrel. You open up that valve and your honey will come out. Now, when it comes out, it's going to have pieces of wax in it, because when you shaved it, you left behind pieces of wax that you shaved. And so when you whip that out, centrifugal force spits out that wax just like the honey. And so you have pieces of wax with your honey at the bottom of your extractor. So what you do is you get a 5-gallon bucket that's got another valve. You can see that okay, right? And you got a strainer. You put that on top of the 5-gallon bucket. So you put this on the shelf, you put this on the floor, you open up this valve, and all the gooey, waxy honey goes into the strainer, and the honey goes through the strainer, and all the pieces stay behind in the filter. And when it comes time to get your honey, you just open up this valve and you put your honey into the bottle. That's what you do to honey. It's not like maple syrup that you have to boil. But this is your jar of honey. Now, we had the question about honey. Different colors, different flavors. Let me see if I can do that. I think I can do this okay. I just told you about the color of honey a little while ago. The color of the honey around here, this part of the country, the flowers that come up in late March, early April, the crocuses, the daffodils, and a couple others, forsythias, by nature, they make a light color nectar. So when the bees bring that light color nectar back to the hive and turn it into honey, you're going to have light color honey. Those plants die. The new plants that come up in May and June have a darker nectar. This is just a nature thing around this part of the country. So when they bring that darker color nectar back to the hive, it makes a darker honey. And the same thing is true. Those plants die. Now here comes late August, September. Those plants that are coming up that time of year, the asters and loosestrife and a couple others, they make a dark nectar, so the bees make dark honey. That's how the color of honey is determined, where the bees get their nectar. Can you see that? Okay, the three different colors. All from my hive, all from my bees. This is early June honey. I don't have a label on that, but I believe that's July, and this is August. Very light, medium, and dark. And again, I mentioned earlier that some people like a very mild taste, and some people like a richer taste. So it all depends on what their preference is, and that's why I take the frames of honey out all during the year, so I can make sure I get different colors of honey for the people who like different taste. I cook with my honey. The only thing I really eat where I would notice the taste is a piece of toast, sliced bananas on it, and a little bit of honey on it. I would probably know the difference in taste between this one and this one if I made a piece of toast like that. But other than that, other than cooking where it's going to disappear into the flavor of whatever I'm cooking, the only other thing I do with my honey is I put it in hot tea. And I'm not going to know the difference between this one and this one in my hot tea. I'm just going to have sweet hot tea. So that's the color and a little bit of the taste. And extending it as far as the taste is concerned is, where are they getting their nectar? Never mind the plants that are up early, but we talked about clover honey. I can't call my honey clover honey because my bees are wild and they're getting dandelions, they're getting clover, they're getting forsythias, they're getting daffodils, they're getting all, so I just call it raw flower, wild flower honey. I can't call it anything else because I have no control where they go. But if you have acres and acres and acres of clover, that's where the bees are going to go, then you can call it clover honey. There's got to be specifications that you have to follow in order to label it. But I have had orange grove honey, I have had apple grove honey, blueberry, cranberry, I've had them all. And you can taste those flavors if it came from the apple orchard. You can taste the apples. If you had it from an orange grove, you can taste the citrus in it. So the color and the taste is based solely on where they get their nectar. And it's good. The only thing I really want to talk about is, so that's my bees. The first year I started beekeeping, you don't usually get any honey the first year. Because if you're starting with a brand new hive with empty frames, they spend their first year building their home. They store some honey, but they're storing it from themselves. And they barely get through that storing enough for themselves for the first year that you're not going to take any of their honey from down here in these boxes, and they're not going to have enough time to fill top boxes for you. So you don't usually expect to get honey as a beekeeper your first year of beekeeping. You'll get honey in your second year because now the house is built. You've kept the queen down there. They've got plenty of time to go up and store honey in the other boxes, so you'll get honey your second year. And in my second year of beekeeping, I got about 100 pounds of honey. It was a great year, my first year. And I said to myself, I said, I can't eat all this honey. It's just like if you have chickens. How many eggs does a chicken lay a day? One chicken will lay 1 egg a day. So if you have 6 chickens, you're going to have 6 eggs today, 6 eggs tomorrow, 6 eggs. You're going to have a few dozen eggs in a week. You're going to eat that many eggs. So it's just like honey. If I get 100 pounds of honey, I can't eat all that honey. So somebody found out that I was a beekeeper, and they said, oh, I'd like to buy some of your honey. And then by word of mouth and going to farmers markets and health fairs and stuff like that, I started selling my honey I don't have a store, I don't have a website, it's all by word of mouth. I'll probably go, after this tonight, I'll go to my local bar and I'm sure somebody will ask me if I have any honey for sale. It turned into a profitable little hobby. I'm not in it for the money, but I'm glad the bees are doing so much work that they're giving me so much honey that I can do something with that honey, and I'm paying myself back for the work I do by the money I make from selling my honey. So it's a nice little hobby where it pays well. The other reason, as far as taste, other than taste is concerned for honey, is I have people that buy honey not only because they love the taste of honey, is it helps them fight their allergies. You might have heard this before. So it's all important to know what flowers you're allergic to. Are you allergic to spring flowers, or are you allergic to fall flowers? So if you're allergic to spring flowers, I want to make sure I have some spring honey for them, and I'll take a teaspoon of this a day, and that'll help fight their allergies. And if you're allergic to fall flowers, you need to take fall flowers. And you need to take local honey. You can buy honey in the store, no doubt about it, but you don't know where it came from, and you don't know what they did to it. It will taste yummy if it comes from California, no doubt. It'll probably taste yummy if it comes from France or Germany. I understand that. But it's not going to help you as far as health benefits, because the only health benefits you're going to get out of it as far as allergies is concerned are the flowers that you're allergic to in this area, not California or Germany. And so I sell honey to people that are allergic to spring or fall flowers to help them with their allergies. The other thing I like to promote within my lectures is that it's a great wound treatment, Ancient warriors that were cut by spears and by swords used to put honey on the wounds to help it heal. It's documented. And we had 2 doctors come and talk to us at Worcester County Beekeepers. Don't let me forget Worcester County Beekeepers, who have published papers. They know what they're doing. They have treated wounds with honey. They said, you have Neosporin in your medicine cabinet, throw it away. You take and you mix a 50-50 combination of honey and Aquaphor. You can buy Aquaphor in Walmart and CVS. It's got its own little anti-inflammatory, it's like a Vaseline kind of consistency. 50% Aquaphor, 50% honey, mix it up. Next time you get cut, put that on your wound, cover it with a bandage, change that a couple times a week. Your wound will heal faster and with less scarring. And so I have a jar of that in my medicine cabinet right now. I'm pretty careful so I don't get cut, but if I do get cut, I put just a little dab, put it on my cut, just like you would Bacitracin Neosporin, bandage it up, and it heals very, very nicely. So there's a lot of good properties with raw honey, other than what I just talked about. I can go on and on about honey itself. And then the last thing I'd like to know is just talk about, not last thing, but as far as the bees themselves are concerned, pollination. In the world, there's more than 40,000 species of bees. Now, when we say bees, we're talking about yellow jackets, hornets, wasps, and all the different varieties of those kind of bumblebees, all those different kinds of bees. Honeybees are just like them. That's 40,000. In the United States, there's a little bit more than 2,000 species of bees. Of those 2,000 species of bees, and honeybees is one of them, there's only 8. I'm getting right. 8 species of honeybees in the United States. The 2 most common are Italian honeybees and Russian honeybees. And just to let you know, honeybees were not natural to the United States. They were introduced in the United States by European settlers. Europeans have been beekeepers for thousands of years. And so when they started populating the United States, they brought honeybees with them because they weren't natural to the United States. All honey, and I put a label on my jars of honey when I sell it to people, will eventually granulate, no matter where you buy it. You buy it at Stop and Shop, you buy it from John, you buy it from Germany or California, all honey will eventually granulate. It's just a natural thickening, then granulating hard. It'll eventually look like brown sugar in your pantry. And they have found granulated sugar in ancient tombs, 2,000 years old. They scraped it out of the bowl, they put it in a jar, you get a pot of hot water, you put that jar in the hot water, it will liquefy the honey, and then you can pour it again. I wouldn't worry about granulated honey myself, because I said, for the most part, I put it in hot tea. So I would just scrape it out of the jar, just like brown sugar, and put it in my hot tea, and it'll melt, and it'll taste the same. It'll never go bad. 2,000 years later, they found honey, reconstituted it, still perfect. Capped honey will never go bad. Honeybees populate about a third of the fruits and vegetables that we eat every day. There are other pollinators out there. Bumblebees, hornets, yellow jackets, they all pollinate. Butterflies and bats, they pollinate too. But just think about it. On a good day, my hive, if I've got 2 brood boxes and I've got some of those bees up there in the honey supers, I've got thousands and thousands of bees out in the field collecting pollen and water and nectar and bringing it back. And by doing that, they collect the pollen, they're pollinating plant to plant. Bumblebees, a typical hive for a bumblebee on the ground is somewhere between 1 and 200 bees. And it's the same ratio. At the most, 100 are going to be out pollinating. I've got thousands of bees out populating. So my honeybees, not just mine, honeybees are so valued just by the sheer numbers that they can help pollinate. Okay, so I would just tell you to stop using certain pesticides and herbicides in your garden, because when you kill dandelions and clover in your yard, you're killing the food that the bees would be eating. I mean, they can go somewhere else, but you just make it harder for them. So once I became a beekeeper, I stopped putting my Scott's weed killer fertilizer on my lawn. I put natural stuff on. Or I let the dandelions grow tall. I let the clover go. I didn't care. I was helping the bees. What else would I say? I raise awareness by going to places and doing a Zoom. This is my second Zoom in about 5 years, I said. But I want to tell you about how I got started in beekeeping. I'm not too sure where you're all living, that you're attending this Zoom meeting, but in the greater Worcester area, there's a publication called the Worcester Magazine newspaper. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but I was reading the Worcester Magazine newspaper one day, and there's a little blurb on one page that said, "Come learn about beekeeping." And I had never thought about being a beekeeper. But I said to my wife, that sounds interesting. Let's go see what this guy has to say about beekeeping. Now, this guy is a commercial beekeeper up in the Tingsboro area. He's a commercial beekeeper. He's got about 500 beehives. He has his own store. He has a bee school. And so he came, I don't know if you know this, but on Route 9 in Spencer, there's a home improvement store called Clem's. It's just like Lowe's and Home Depot. Big white owls, tall shelves. And he came down from Tingsboro and he spoke for 2 hours about beekeeping, the highlights of this 8-week bee school. And at the end of those 2 hours, I said to my wife, we need to get bees. They are fascinating little creatures. And so the first year I was a beekeeper, I did it all on my own. Google this, Google that. How do I do this? When do I do this? Why is this? Why is that? I didn't have a clue. Self-taught my first year. Very hard, frustrating, scary. But I did okay. My second year of beekeeping, I discovered there's an organization called Worcester County Beekeepers Association. Worcester County Beekeepers Association is the oldest county beekeepers association in the United States. We're pretty sure it's the largest county beekeepers association in the United States. We don't have a building, it's just a collection of people interested in beekeeping. We meet all year. In the warm weather, we meet at somebody's house who's got a bunch of beehives. And what we do, and I'll just use May as an example, it was last Saturday, we go to this person's house, there'll be about 200 people there. They'll say, hey, welcome to the meeting, blah, 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 blah. This is what we're gonna talk about. Here's what you should be doing in your hive in May, as an example. Okay, you understand what we're doing here? Just a 5-minute introduction. Okay, you 10 people go to this hive. There'll be an experienced beekeeper there, and you'll open up that hive, and that beekeeper will point out to you what you should be looking for and what you should be doing in your hive in May. June comes along, you do the same thing. We go to somebody else's house. We have a different agenda for that month, what you should be doing in your hive in June. You break into small groups and you learn what to do in your hive in June. July, August, September, October, outdoors. Come the cold weather months, November, December, January, February, March, we meet indoors in the Knights of Columbus and Leicester. on a Friday night. We have a potluck supper, and we have a guest speaker that talks about something related to beekeeping. So all year we have meetings. So backing up, once I found about Worcester County Beekeepers Association, I found out they have their own bee school. Cool, I can go learn about bees from the experts. They used to have it at the UMass Memorial Hospital. I showed up there the first night of bee school. When I went to Clem's, there were 50 people sitting in folding chairs. And I said to my wife, oh, I didn't realize there were this many people interested in beekeeping. There were 300 people in my first night of bee school. Wow, this many people interested in beekeeping. We were there for a few years. Then we moved to Grafton High School. And then COVID came along. And now we do our own bee school, Worcester County Beekeepers Bee School, by Zoom. That was the last time I gave a Zoom presentation. I've given several for them in person, but that was the only one I did by Zoom. And I did not everything that I showed you tonight, mostly just about the hive, not about the bee duties and stuff like extracting honey, just how to put a hive and what equipment you need. 8 weeks long. It started in February, whatever that second Thursday, February 13th, somewhere around that Thursday, 7 to 9 Thursday night for 8 weeks. All basics about beekeeping. A good benefit of Worcester County Beekeepers Association is they have a mentor program, free of charge. If you need help being a brand new beekeeper, on our website, they have a list of mentors by city who have volunteered their time to help you as a brand new beekeeper. So what you do is after you leave the May meeting, as an example, you go home and you call your mentor and you hook up with him or her, and now that mentor will come to your house and your hives, and you will do the same thing with your own hive that you saw somebody do at the May meeting at somebody else's hive. And they'll do that in June and July and August to help you in your first year of beekeeping. And usually by your second year, you get your feet on the ground. You'll still have a good relationship with your mentor. You may become good friends. I'm still good friends with 3 people that I mentored 5 years ago. We still get together once in a while. I help them with their hives. They help them with my hives. We like each other. But it's free of charge. They volunteer. You just got to make sure that your schedules match up. That's about it. That's a long talk for me tonight. I know some of it was technically related delays, but I think we finally got that out. And I'm glad that I got some feedback from you that you could see me okay and hear me okay. And hopefully I've answered all your questions or most of your questions, but now I'll go back to the laptop. I'm done and answer any last minute questions. I mean, I can go on and on for hours. I hope you understand that, but I want you to understand any questions related to what I talked about. Yeah, normally, let me go back up here. Is that the right screen? I see. Okay, I'm going to go down list. I very rarely collect honey from the bottom box because that's what they eat for themselves. Royal jelly is a substance that the queens make. They have a different body system than the other girls. And I'll back up. I didn't talk about how they make a new queen. If they need to make a new queen, they feed all the other bees a balanced diet. Pollen, nectar, water, royal jelly, a little bit of each one. But if they need to make a new queen, what they will do is they'll take a brand new girl egg. It's got to be brand new, a day or 2 at the most. They'll put it in a cell, and all they will feed that cell is royal jelly. No pollen, no nectar. And the fact that they feed that egg, royal jelly, turns that girl egg into a queen. Amazing. Let me see here. Yes, there'll be wasps and hornets that will try to get into the hives. Most of the time they can fight against those insects. It's those murder hornets and a couple of the strong-skinned ones that they have a hard time with, but they usually do okay fighting against forays into their hive. They'll gang up on them. For water, if they don't have a close water supply, you can put a saucer out there with water in it. But again, like you said, Diane, you need to put some sticks or rocks in there because if they fall into the water, they can't get out. So if you put some sticks or rocks in the water, they'll splash around, and finally latch onto something that they can hold onto and they can crawl out. Mouse protection and guards, yes. In the fall, somewhere around the middle of October, I put mouse guards on the front of my entrance to keep the mice out, because the mice will go in there and chew a whole bunch of frames to help them make their nest and stay nice on. Because those bees will keep that hive 60 degrees in the wintertime, and the mice will love that. So they'll go in there and they'll destroy several frames to make a nest to keep warm all winter. And so you'll put a mouse guard on it to keep the mice out. I know there's some discrepancy. Some people will say, I'd rather get my bees from up north versus getting from down south. But I've gotten a couple packages of bees from down south, and they've lasted several years. So I personally don't think there's a problem. I think the weather transitions easily enough from summer, cooler in the fall before it gets cold, that they get acclimatized. And again, they'll keep their hive warm and they do okay over the winter. All right, Jones. So if the bees kick the drones out in the late fall and early winter, the queen will lay new boy eggs in the late winter, early spring. And so they'll be there in the spring and summer. Yes, they always make more honey. They love to store. And that's why we take their extra store, that they have more than they need. You'd have to look up the chemical compound about what's in honey. It's got antibacterial, anti-inflammatory. And the same thing is true of the propolis. You'd have to look at the chemical makeup. I don't memorize it. I just know it's there. That those materials that they make out of their body helps fight them to do that stuff. So it's a great building material and eating material. Let me see. Restarting my second hive, lost hive this winter. Can you restarting and what frames to use? You'd have to look at that. If they're new frames, they're only like a year or two old. If you are pretty sure they didn't die of some disease like American foul brood or European foul brood, some other couple others, nosema and things like that. If maybe they didn't have enough food, maybe it was too cold. There's a couple of different reasons why they might die. I hope you treated them for mites, but there's several reasons why they might die. But if you think it was a natural death, so to speak, versus a disease, then you can reuse those hives. If you want to make sure, take the frames out if you haven't put new bees in there yet, and give them a brush down with white vinegar. That will kill most of the problems like mold and mildew and stuff like that, to get a good start on them. Equipment. That, if I went online, again, I don't have a slide to show you, but I went online in November, so roughly 7 months ago, a hive kit with 2 deep boxes, 1 honey super, a bottom board, an entrance reducer, inner cover and outer cover, and all the frames. So 30 frames, unassembled and unpainted, $150. If you want them to paint it, they're going to charge you $200 and some odd. And that's just a starter. You're probably going to buy over time 1 more box of each size in case you have to swap them out, and several frames of each size in case you, like I said, if I take my honey frames out, I need to put another frame in there. So you need a few extra frames of each one. Your equipment, like I said, the jacket, the smoker, the hive tool, somewhere around $50. You don't give children less than 1-year-old honey. I'm hitting these questions, they come. And let's see, if I added up all the time I spent on my 2 hives last summer, I mean, not last summer, but last year, 2024, I would say between 30 and 35 hours I spent on those 2 hives last year. Starting a hive, most bee suppliers, when they go down south and come up here, they'll have 3 issues of packages. 2 weeks in April and 1 week in May. I know 3 bee supply companies. They all follow not exactly the same dates, but all the 3 of those bee suppliers will issue packages twice in April and once in May. So you don't want to usually start a package in June because it's starting to get too much in the season, and they may not get strong enough come wintertime to be okay. A nuke, you can go as far as July. Manuka honey, I have a jar of it. I'm not going to eat it. It's just like having a collectible coin. What are you going to do with it? You're just going to look at it because it's so nice. It's just where they get their that species of bees, and I don't even know what species of bees it is, but that species of bees and where they get their nectar makes that honey different than what you'd get in Massachusetts, Vermont, and New Hampshire. And it's an even, according to these two doctors I told you about making the wound treatment, if you can get Manuka honey for your ointment to mix with Aquaphor, Manuka honey's got better quality health properties in it than just regular honey. No, the mites, for people that don't know what mites to a bee are like ticks to a dog. They're little parasites, and they latch onto the bees and they suck the blood out of them just like ticks do to a dog. And the mites themselves don't kill the bees, but because if you get 4 or 5 or 6 mites on one bee, you know how small that girl worker is. She's a half an inch. And so if you get like 5 or 6 mites on that little insect, they weaken it so much. It's just like you and me. Are you more likely to catch a disease if you're healthy or if you're weakened? And so that's what happens to the bees. They get very weak, which makes them susceptible to other diseases. There's several different treatments for mites. One treatment for mites doesn't affect the honey. The mites themselves don't affect the honey at all. It's the treatment for the mites. One treatment doesn't affect the honey, and so you can leave your honey supers on the hive. The other more common treatment for mites is you have to take your honey supers off because the treatment will permeate the wax cappings and go into the honey. It doesn't affect the bees' honey, but it'll affect the honey that we would consume as humans. Yeah, there is bacteria in honey, but it doesn't hurt younger kids and grown-ups. But the babies, the 1 years and less, and some doctors will even say 2 years and younger, their bodies aren't strong enough to resist that botulism bacteria. And so that's why you don't give honey to youngsters. 2 years, and I would say 2 years is okay, but definitely not 1 year and less. Well, that's it. Thank you for attending. Oh, my daughter's veterinarian. I'm not familiar with any vets around here. Can't help you in that. I'm sorry. All right. Thank you for attending. I hope you got some good stuff out of this. If you're interested, before you disappear, let me see if I can do this. Dun, 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 my wallet. Don't go away. Let me get my wallet. I'm going to hold something up to the camera. Can you see that okay? My email address and my phone number. I don't know if you can take a snapshot of that or just write it. So if you can't, my email address is Hedly, Hedly, at charter.net. If you have any thought about being a beekeeper and you want some guidance about when do you do this, when do you do this, as far as I'm thinking about being a beekeeper, when do I buy my equipment, where do I order my bees, when should I install my bees, those general questions before you start rolling, get in touch with me and I'll be glad to point you in the right direction. You're very welcome. You guys have an enjoyable rest of the evening, and you know where I am if you need me. Take care. Dun, 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 dun.